What if the battlefield was your backyard? What if the war we've seen in distant lands suddenly erupted on American soil? It's a chilling thought, isn't it? A scenario we might shudder to even entertain. But sometimes it's important to ask the unthinkable, to consider the improbable. Right now, we live in relative peace. Our children play in parks, not in the rubble of bombed buildings. We wake up to the sound of alarm clocks, not air raid sirens. Yet, what if that changed? What if, instead of seeing conflict on our screens, we saw it on our streets? What if our enemies weren't thousands of miles away, but were right here, living among us? How would that change our lives, our country, our very sense of security? This is a hypothetical situation, but one that warrants our attention. Let's explore this further. Imagine our enemies are already here, crossing our borders and blending amongst us. We've unknowingly fed and housed them. Picture this. It's a regular Tuesday morning. You're walking down the street, getting your morning coffee, waving hello to your neighbors. But what if, unbeknownst to you, some of these seemingly ordinary people are not who they seem? Imagine individuals infiltrating our society, living amongst us, not as friends or neighbors, but as silent intruders. They've crossed our borders, not with armies or weapons, but with smiles and handshakes. They've entered our homes, not as invaders, but as guests. They've become a part of our communities, not as allies, but as enemies in disguise. These silent intruders live side by side with us, sharing our streets, our schools, our workplaces. They're invisible, hidden in plain sight, their true intentions concealed behind a mask of normalcy. They've integrated into our lives so seamlessly that we've unknowingly welcomed them into our homes, fed them at our tables, and shared with them our hopes and dreams. But while we've been living our lives, they've been planning a war not on distant shores, but right here on American soil. They've been silently gathering intelligence, identifying our strengths and weaknesses, and preparing to strike when we least expect it. This is a war unlike any other. It's a war not of armies and battlegrounds, but of hidden enemies and silent threats. It's a war that doesn't start with a bang, but with a whisper. A war that's not fought in the open, but in the shadows. We've become so accustomed to peace, so confident in our safety, that we've failed to see the danger lurking in our midst. We've become complacent, and in our complacency, we've become vulnerable. We've become blindsided by the enemy within, setting us up for a war we never anticipated. In the wake of this unexpected conflict, our economy would inevitably suffer a catastrophic blow. Imagine, if you will, the economic engine that powers the United States suddenly grinding to a halt. In the midst of war, trade would be severely impacted. With conflict zones potentially popping up across the nation, transport routes would be disrupted. Trucks, trains, and ships, the lifeblood of our commerce, could be immobilized, causing a domino effect on the supply chain. The result? Shortages of goods, from the most basic necessities to luxury items, and with supply unable to meet demand, prices would skyrocket. This is the reality of inflation, an economic monster that would rear its ugly head in the face of war. But let's not forget about employment. In a peaceful society, jobs are created and industries thrive. But in a society at war, the landscape changes drastically. Many businesses would be forced to shut down, unable to operate amidst the chaos. This would result in massive job losses, pushing the unemployment rate to unprecedented heights. Remember, every job lost is a livelihood affected, a family potentially pushed into poverty. And then there's the matter of government spending. Wars are expensive, and the funds to finance them have to come from somewhere. That somewhere is usually the national budget. Money that could have been used for education, healthcare, infrastructure, things that uplift the nation and its citizens, would be redirected towards the war effort. Essentially, we'd be robbing Peter to pay Paul. Lastly, let's talk about foreign investment. The United States is a favored destination for investors around the world, thanks to its stability and strong economic performance. But war brings uncertainty, and uncertainty is kryptonite to investors. Foreign investment would likely dry up, further exacerbating the economic crisis. A war on our soil would not just drain our resources, but would also cripple our economy. In the end, the financial impact of a war on American soil would be devastating, touching every corner of our economy and every aspect of our lives. Beyond the financial impact, we'd face an even more challenging issue, a moral dilemma. Imagine the war not in some distant land, but in our own backyard. A war where the enemy isn't an abstract figure on a screen, but someone we've seen, interacted with, perhaps even broken bread with. The very essence of war forces us to confront our own humanity. For instance, consider the potential for loss of innocent lives. It's one thing to hear about it on the news, quite another to witness it firsthand. The thought of our neighbors, friends, or even our own family becoming casualties of war is a chilling one. It's a scenario that would force us to reckon with the value we place on human life. But the moral implications don't stop at the loss of innocent lives. They extend to the very nature of warfare itself. It's easy to justify war when it's fought on foreign soil, against a faceless enemy. But what happens when the enemy isn't faceless? What happens when they're people we've known, trusted, even cared for? Do we still have the right to harm them, to take away their lives? The ethical questions surrounding warfare become much more complex, much more personal when the war is fought on our own soil. It forces us to question whether the ends truly justify the means. War also challenges our perception of right and wrong. Can we still claim the moral high ground when we're forced to combat an enemy within our borders? Can we still stand by our principles, our values, when we're fighting for our very survival? These are the questions we'd be forced to grapple with if war ever came to American soil. It's a sobering thought, one that puts into perspective the true cost of war. It's not just about money or resources, it's about the very fabric of our society, our humanity. War would not only challenge our financial stability, but also our moral compass. It would force us to confront the darkest parts of ourselves, to question our values, our principles, and ultimately, our humanity. The most devastating impact of a war on American soil might be the mental toll it would take on us. Imagine the constant fear of not knowing when or where the next attack might happen. This is a reality for many people in war-torn countries, and it could potentially become our reality too. The constant stress and fear can lead to a multitude of mental health issues, including post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. PTSD is a serious condition that can occur after a person has experienced or witnessed a traumatic event. Symptoms can include flashbacks, nightmares, severe anxiety, and uncontrollable thoughts about the event. It's not just soldiers who are affected, civilians too can suffer from PTSD. But it's not only PTSD we would have to worry about. The constant stress and fear can also lead to other mental health issues such as depression and anxiety disorders. The feeling of helplessness, the loss of control over one's own life, can lead to a deep sense of despair. And then there's the potential for a long-term mental health crisis. With millions of people potentially affected, our mental health resources could be stretched to the breaking point. We would need to ensure that mental health support is available for everyone who needs it, but this would be a massive undertaking, requiring a significant increase in resources and funding. The impact on children could be particularly devastating. Children are especially vulnerable to the psychological effects of war. They might struggle to understand what is happening, and this confusion and fear can lead to long-term mental health issues. We don't like to think about these things, but it's important to understand the potential consequences of war on our own soil. It's not just about the physical damage and financial cost. The mental toll could be far greater and longer lasting. The scars of war are not just physical, they are mental and emotional, and they last long after the war ends. Once the smoke clears and the war ends, we'd be left with a nation in ruins. A stark image, isn't it? But we must face the unvarnished truth. War on American soil would leave an indelible scar on our nation's history and psyche. The physical damage would be immense, yes, but the invisible wounds would cut even deeper. The buildings can be rebuilt, the streets repaved, but how do you mend a broken spirit? How do you restore the sense of security and peace that was taken away? Civil unrest could break out in the aftermath. People grappling with the loss of property, livelihoods, and loved ones may struggle to come to terms with their new reality. The fabric of our society could be stretched thin, with trust in institutions and each other potentially eroding. The road to recovery would be long and arduous. It would require not just the rebuilding of infrastructure, but also the healing of hearts. A collective effort where every American, irrespective of their color, creed, or political leaning, would need to work towards healing and rebuilding. War is never just about the battles fought and the lives lost. It's about the aftermath. It's about the child who grows up without a parent, the soldier who comes home only to fight a new battle against his own demons, the community that has to rebuild from the ashes. The cost of war is not just measured in dollars and cents. It's measured in the trauma that echoes through generations, in the dreams that are shattered, in the innocence that is lost. In the aftermath, we would find ourselves in the midst of a metamorphosis, a painful transformation forced upon us by circumstances. And as we rise from the ashes, we'd be a different nation, shaped by our trials and tribulations. War leaves a lasting impact that extends far beyond the battlefield. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but it's the reality we must face, the conversation we must have, because it's only by acknowledging and understanding the full impact of war that we can truly appreciate the value of peace. The possibility of war on American soil is a grim scenario to consider. We've traversed the unthinkable, the silent intruders crossing our borders, their intentions concealed beneath the veneer of refuge. We've opened our doors, offered our hospitality, oblivious to the potential peril lurking in the shadows. The potential financial impact of such a conflict is daunting. An economy, robust and flourishing, could be reduced to rubble, just like the buildings and infrastructure. Jobs would be lost, markets would crash, and the cost of living would skyrocket. The ripple effect would be felt across every industry, every household, every individual. And then there's the moral dilemma. The very fabric of our society would be tested. The principles we hold dear, the values we fought for, would be under threat. We'd be facing an enemy we've fed and housed, an enemy we've welcomed with open arms. The betrayal would be profound, leaving us questioning our own humanity and the humanity of others. The mental toll cannot be understated. Fear, anxiety, paranoia, these would be our constant companions. The psychological impact would be as damaging as the physical destruction. Sleepless nights, fraught days, the constant worry for our loved ones. This would become our new normal. The aftermath of such a conflict would be unimaginable. We'd be left picking up the pieces, rebuilding not just our homes and cities, but our lives. The scars would run deep, etched into our hearts and minds, a constant reminder of the cost of war. While we hope this remains a hypothetical scenario, it's important to consider the potential impacts and be prepared. The world is an unpredictable place, and the only certainty is uncertainty. As we navigate this uncertainty, it's crucial that we stay informed, stay vigilant, and most importantly, stay human. We must remember that our strength lies in our unity, our compassion, and our resilience. Let's hope we never have to test these in the face of war on our own soil. We've explored a distressing scenario today, but it's one that emphasizes the importance of peace and preparedness. In our journey through this hypothetical landscape, we've witnessed the potential consequences of war reaching our very doorsteps. We've seen the silent intruders, the financial burdens, the moral dilemmas, and the mental toll it could take on every one of us. Take a moment to reflect on this. Close your eyes and imagine your world as it is now. The peace you enjoy, the freedom you have, the safety you feel. All of these could be jeopardized in the face of war. But it is essential to remember that this is a hypothetical situation, an exploration into the what-ifs, and not a prophecy of the future. Now open your eyes and take a deep breath. Let's bring our focus back to the present, to the reality that we live in. Despite the challenges and conflicts we may face as a nation, we are not at war on our soil. We enjoy peace, and it's a state we often take for granted. So let's cherish it, protect it, and strive to extend it to every corner of the world. However, being at peace should not equate to complacency. Our exploration today serves as a reminder that we should always be prepared. Preparedness, both at the individual and national level, can mean the difference between chaos and order, between despair and hope. Let's not forget the importance of diplomacy and peaceful conflict resolution. In the face of disagreement, we must strive to find common ground, to negotiate, to compromise. We must remember that every war begins with a failure of diplomacy. Thus, the pursuit of peace must always be our first and most crucial strategy. In the end, we must strive for peace and prepare for any challenges that may come our way. If you found this video thought-provoking, don't forget to like and subscribe for more engaging content.